Oh, you've got an obituary.
I have the obituary. Well, let me just tell you what what
yes.
I know about
Thank you.
about John. John died in 1945. In 1965. 1965. And a few years before, I met him here in New York because a friend of mine called Richard Miller, who is dead now, 30 years, was a very close friend of his, Richard Miller. I heard from Richard, now and then, was talking about this man called John Thompson, but vaguely. I never really paid that much attention to it. And then one evening, in the probably in the 1965, in the early 60s, I was able to meet him because he just popped up in New York, John Thompson. As a matter of fact, I remember that we were at a theater and he was among the audience. And then they saluted each other with great affection, and then from that moment on, he became almost part of our circle in a way, or vice versa. So these few years went by, and in the beginning I was sort of, in a way, I sort of kept my distance from him because he seemed like a very interesting and very mysterious kind of person. I didn't know his past. I didn't know anything about it. But then, he sort of liked me very much. And so we became friends. And after all these years, 3 or 4 years, I remember that I came back from Italy, because I used to go to Italy every year, in August. And he came to visit me, not in this apartment, in another apartment that I had downstairs on the second floor. And I remember very distinctly. And he had been sick. He had very, very strong cold or kind of bronchitis and whatever. And he was complaining, but he was feeling much better. And he was on his way to the Virgin Islands. As a matter of fact, he asked me, I said, would you like to come with me? I'd love to have company. And I just couldn't, because that was the beginning of my business, I had a greeting card company. And that was the beginning when I really had to work very, very hard.
What sort of company?
Tiber Press was called.
Oh, I see.
Tiber, T-I-B-R.
Mm-hmm.
So he left around probably the 10th of August to go down there. And just about 2 or 3 days after, I got a telegram from him wishing me a happy birthday. And I remember because it was so, so interesting. It was so sweet of him to do that. And he wasn't feeling well. And after about 4 or 5 days, or maybe 2 or 3 days, I bought the Time in the morning, and I read his obituary. It was a very, very dramatic feeling, and I really had. So I kept that obituary, which was almost illegible. It's so old. It's 40 years ago. Plus, I have for you. I have a photograph that in a very strange circumstances I found to talk about John's mysteriousness about everything. He had died already many, many, many years, but maybe after 20 years that he died, or 20 years ago, I was in Rome, and I was walking along a street in the center of Rome, and I saw a photograph of John, quite big, about like this, in the window of a photographer. It was right there. I was really struck to see this very beautiful picture of John. So I went in and I begged, the owner if I could have a copy, and he wouldn't do that. I insisted, and so on and so forth. So I was very frustrated. But you know what happened? That 2 years after, in another street of Rome, in another photographic shop, there was the same big, like as an advertising of the talent of these people. And so I was lucky this time, and they did a copy for me, which I had it framed here. So that is during the period that he was here. I mean, I can tell you if you want to ask me questions, yeah. I will tell you.
Okay.
But otherwise, I will just keep on talking and tell you what.
No, you talk and tell, and then I will ask.
Then you'll tell. Well, anyway, I knew that that he had a practice here. He was I don't know if he would, what kind of title you could give to him, because I find out that he was interested only in very, very, very difficult cases, mostly people that they were totally impossible to take care. So much so that sometimes, I think I had 2 trips with him. He invited me to go into the country. I think it was in Connecticut somewhere. It was on a weekend because he was visiting some of his, one of his patients in Connecticut.
Was it by any chance Vermont, Spring Lake Range?
Vermont is all the way further up, but it could be. It took a long time. It took a long time. He had this fantastic a Jaguar, remember, a silver Jaguar, which everybody sort of stopped looking at this. It was a great. John was, was a very interesting looking man. Sometimes I couldn't even understand the character, his whatever, he was trying to do, because I was young in those days, and I was fascinated by this person. But I remember very vividly, that when he stopped somewhere, it was like some kind of a hospital, and then this young man came out, and he was so delighted to see Dr. Thompson. He came into the car, and then we moved around. I remember that we probably stopped for lunch somewhere, and then so the day went like this, and he spoke to him. This young man was sitting next to me, so I would observe him, and he seemed very spaced out in a way. But there was something so strange about the whole thing, But then I realized that he did that all the time, that he had a lot of very special patients, all sort of scattered somewhere, and then he took care of them. And this is one thing. One thing that he did for me personally is that I was working very, very, very hard at my company, called Tiber Press, and I was a compulsive, really, worker. Of course, my partner in this business was Richard Miller, who had been his friend. But he insisted, he was able to take me out of that place almost once a week to sort of, if he felt that I needed some exercise, I needed to get away from work and so on. And reluctantly, I did go with him at the place here in New York. He was a member of the New York Athletic Club, which was a very strange club because I always felt that was a club that, very, very, Jews cannot get in, for instance, to tell you. And that was the thing that I couldn't understand why John was sponsoring this place. It was very strange. But anyway, I remember that I might have been at this place maybe 7 or 8 or 10 times, I remember. Everybody was nude there. And there were swimming pools. And I remember that, I felt very uncomfortable, but I understood that he was really trying to help me. And he was always very sweet and wonderful. He never talked about his personal life. But we had long conversation. I remember that I tried to sort of nudge him to sort of be more open, and so I could find out what kind of a real person he was. But he knew everybody. When he died, there was here in New York, not immediately, but after, maybe a year after, there was some kind of celebrations, and everybody was there. I remember I saw Winston Auden, which I knew myself, and he was there, in his slippers all the time.
You knew Auden?
Oh yes, very well, very close friend. Okay. And Christopher Isherwood and all these people. So he'd been in London, and it's hard to remember details about this, but he was a very dear friend, and from the moment I met him and the time that he died, it was only a few years. That's all I can say. That's about grosso modo.
Yeah, okay. So, but you know about Vive?
I know Vive because Richard told me all about it, my friend. I knew Vive, of course, because it's they talked about, because I asked Richard what was doing. I knew that he was in Europe during the war. I always thought that he might be even in my sort of fantasy, I imagined that, it sounded like a spy or something like that, someone who might have been involved in some kind of very, very, very unusual. Richard was a friend of mine. We became very close friends. After I met, I met John that evening, and then we became sort of very close. As I remember, Richard and I used to go and visit him I think he lived in Riverdale. He had an apartment there, and he used to go to, well, with Richard they were very, very close. I think that there was some kind of correspondence between the two of them. I think that John, when Richard was very young, and immediately after the war, and he was trying to go to Italy and study, John helped him. He was able to suggest which university to go in Rome, and he knew so many people, so he was able to. This is fragments of things that I sort of caught.
And Richard Miller was an artist.
Yes, he was studying. He studied art historian, and when I met him in Italy, he was studying at the university in Rome.
Oh, I see, an art historian. Okay.
In Rome,
and who else was part of the friendship circle that you had? Is there anyone else who you remember?
Here in New York?
Who would have known John? Yeah, who would have known John Thompson?
Well, he's offhand. I knew that. Well, he had lots of friends, but people. Yes, there was a person, but again, that was. Do you know somebody called John Rechy?
Yeah, City of the Night.
John Rechy, City
writer.
of Night. Well, I mean, they knew each other. I think John was a great admirer of City of Night, and they saw each other.
Okay. I mean, that, in a way, is an early... Is it fair to call that an early sort of, I can say, a book about gay rights?
A book about gay rights?
Gay rights.
No, City of Night. Did you read that book? Well, you should read it, because it's probably it's the first openly homosexual book. Yeah. John was a very uninhibited creature, and he just happened to be a good writer, so he wrote about his life in America. And everything was very, very open. That book became a bestseller. And I remember that Richard gave it to him to read, and John was so enthusiastic about that book that I think that he contacted John, and I think that they saw each other. But he was interested in, he didn't like a lot of other books that he wrote later on, because they were all, actually, they were a little too obvious and too open.
I mean, would you say that John was, he was supportive of a humane understanding of homosexuality?
Well, sexuality was very interesting for him. That's what I never understood about John. I tried many times, because I always, felt that, he might be not homosexual, but, sort of there was something sort of peculiar about him. And in my naivete in those days, and I was a little more brassy when I came, when I grew up, I was trying to sort of find out. I used to sort of ask him questions, but he was always very, 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 very cryptical about the whole thing. So, but I really loved him. I mean, just such a beautiful, beautiful, wonderful. He was a very, very close friend of the Spencers. Stephen Spencer's and Natasha Spender's. These are in London.
Yeah, I know Natasha.
You know Natasha now, she's still alive. So Natasha could tell you a lot. I remember that Natasha came to America. This I knew because he told me that Natasha came to America because there was some problem with her health, maybe some kind of cancer or whatever it is. And then she came here, and then they saw each other, and they spent time together.
And did John? I mean, he appreciated your work from the press.
Oh, John, yes. It was. If you want more about me and the press, one day, I don't have to tell you now, because in London there is a magazine which apparently is a very illustrious magazine called Print Quarterly.
Yeah.
Do you know about it?
I don't.
Huh?
I don't, I'm afraid.
You don't?
Yeah.
But maybe in the spring there'll be an article written that will be published by this magazine that talks about Tiber Press and Floriano Vecchi.
Wonderful. Okay.
So keep an eye on
that.
that.
Thank you. I will.
Because, the woman that wrote this article, who contacted me about several months ago, she was the head of the print department at the Museum of Modern Art here for 30 years. She's very, very well known. I didn't know her, but I got to know her because she interviewed me 5 or 6 times. So, and now it's ready. She just sent the whole thing.
Wonderful.
So,
okay. Yes, I must.
So it tells you who I am, more or less,
yes.
what I did, and she does it very well.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, because Frank Thompson, remembered, he said you made beautiful cards, which you published.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, my company was it was the best company in the United States. As a matter of fact, I was thinking about this a few days ago, after I finished being interviewed by Riva Castleman. This is the woman. And I said, I forgot to tell her that, there were 2 gentlemen that came from London to the Tiber Press in the 60s, I think it was. And they came because they bought a lot of the rights of a lot of designs that I did for here. And they were published in England. They printed there, and then they sent me samples. They were very beautifully done. I forgot the name of the people. So some people in England bought my card over there. So.
Wonderful.
But here in America, they were very, very special. We did I did a collection of greeting cards designed by Cecil Beaton, all based on sketches and studies for the theater and for the ballet, and so on and so forth.
Did you go to the ballet with John?
No.
No. Did you have any links in the church with John?
With the church?
Yeah.
No.
You didn't go to church with him?
No, we never talked about that. And
because John was Catholic. I mean, he could.
Yes, I know that he was Catholic, but I never knew that he was a practicing Catholic.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Well, he was a saint, so I mean, I'm sure that fits with everything. Yes.
It's a nice description of him. Is there anybody else that you know who might remember him?
It's hard. I mean, the person would be Richard, but he's dead. He died 30 years ago. So I am, I always thought of John, and even not being a Catholic. Are you Catholic or?
I'm not Catholic.
You're not
no.
Catholic. But I always thought, because, his photograph was already by my bedroom, next to Richard,
yes.
As a matter of fact. And if I had to say a prayer in the evening, there was always one for John. I was very, very, very fascinated by this man. I knew that there was something so special, which I never really got to know very well.
It would have meant a lot to him, the prayer.
Hmm?
A prayer meant a lot to him. He writes to his adopted son about prayer.
Yeah, I mean, yes, the prayer, just the Requiem Aeterna. And, well, yes, he used to go to Mexico quite often because he was born there. And he had his mother and father, I think it says in the obituary that they were still alive at the time when John was 59 years old when he died.
Did he write to you?
No, because there was no reason, really.
Did he give you anything?
No, I gave him
Painting?
a lot of beautiful things, which I, in a way, I wasn't sorry that, I lost them, but I gave him a pair of cufflinks, which were just magnificent, made in Italy with in little pietratura. He loved lapis lazuli.
Yeah.
Did you know that? No.
I didn't know that exactly, but I would imagine.
I gave him a box of lapis lazuli made in England for his birthday. And another time I gave him a pair of the most fantastic, beautiful cufflinks, gold and lapis lazuli, but with you see these things here, these are micro mosaic.
Yeah.
But they were made of micro mosaic. And,
yeah.
These are the 2 things that I remember because lapis lazuli was, his eyes were sort of bluish. Yeah, that's what he liked.
That's nice. Well, that's very kind. It's very nice to hear that because, as I say, it's so precious to meet people.
As far as as Frank, I was surprised. Was he much younger than?
He is a bit young. You knew Frank?
I only met him once. I only met him at, I think,
Memorial.
He was there.
He mentioned.
But he knew about me and Richard, but he kept his distances. You know, after John died, I don't know. There was something that I have always had a feeling that there was something about John that he didn't approve.
He's been very sweet to me. He's helped me.
You only met him recently?
I've not met him. We
talked on the phone.
Sent letters and talked on the phone, and he sent me some photographs.
I don't have any opinion about Frank because I never had a chance even to talk to him. So.
Okay. No, he mentioned, the other name he mentioned was a young photographer and architect, Hieme Arche, A-R-C-H-E.
We didn't have any friends really in common. No, it was.
Interesting, but he obviously.
So these things up there, up to Riverdale, he had stories, but of course, wonderful, fascinating stories. But I don't really remember any of that.
No.
No.
Did he talk about Mexico?
Once he called us up, Richard and I, and she said, "You must come to dinner because I just came back from Mexico and I have a perfect Mexican dinner here that I brought. I had it prepared there and I took it over with the plane." And then we went up there and then it was this gorgeous dinner, including that tamales. No, what is it called? That one made with the dish made with chocolate. Tamale. Well, there is a special dish in which the sauce is made of chocolate, which just the idea, sort of makes me puking. But it was just wonderful. He was just so enthusiastic about, these things. He was full of these unusual things that make such an impression on people.
Yeah, and he loved Italy as well.
Yes, I think that he knew a lot of people in Italy, but I don't know who was his friend.
Yeah. No, he did help a lot of people. I mean, that's absolutely clear. And he was close. I think the friendships were very strong and long-lasting. And he thought very deeply about.
If you will be able to write a biography of John, I mean, this is an incredible challenge that one is.
Well, I hope to be able to do it.